you are coming up in like another 3 months or so. You'll have 2 years of sobriety?
Correct. Yeah.
That's awesome. Congratulations.
Thanks, man.
But you came into the program in 2005.
Yeah. Long time ago.
So 20 years, and you had little stints of sobriety. Well, actually, no, you had 1 7-year
Yep.
stint of sobriety,
Yep.
which I think is so valuable to our audience in the sense that relapse, it doesn't need to happen, but if it does, it's okay. And you can come back. You can make it back. The odds of you making it back are very slim, hence why relapse is not suggested.
Right.
But I think your experience will help so many people.
Cool.
And
I hope so.
I mean, you have a lot. You have a family now. You have 5 kids. You are active in sobriety. You just wrote a book as well,
Yep.
Which is amazing. And congratulations.
Thanks, man.
When did the book come out?
Came out 3 or 4 weeks ago.
Wow, congrats.
Fresh. Yeah.
So you're on tour right now.
Kind of, not yet. I mean, we just got like the website up, and I don't know what's going to happen with it. Just kind of felt like it was supposed to exist.
Yeah.
It took almost 4 years to get it done.
Yeah.
And now it does. So
let's take a step back. Where are you from originally?
I was born in Dallas. Moved to Tampa when I was 6. So I mean, I largely grew up in Florida.
Okay.
But when you're from Texas, your family claims Texas, right? That's just kind of a thing. So if anyone ever asks, like, I'm from Texas. I was born in Texas, but most of my growing up took place in Florida. Spent 4 years in Tokyo, Japan as a kid.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, my dad was a consultant for Price Waterhouse.
Okay.
He was sent over there to start up SAP Japan. So he was like the first employee of SAP Japan. So we were there for 4 years, which was wild.
Right.
I mean, that's not, there's varying degrees of like foreign. There's like, yeah, Canada's foreign, but they look like us and they talk like us, And then you've got like, Europe foreign, and they have a different language, but they kind of look like you. In Japan, they don't look like you. They don't talk like you. Like it is, it is foreign as foreign can get. And so it was a hell of a cool experience though. Like,
yeah, that's a full on culture shock too.
Full culture shock. And by the time I left there, I was fluent in Japanese. I could read it as quick as I could read English. Because, when you're a kid, you like sponge that shit up, right?
Yep.
So, and I was going to a school called ASIJ, American School in Japan. But most of the kids were Japanese. And so I was required to take Japanese. And then when you're immersed in the culture, like,
you just learn it.
Yeah. And plus I was like I was a really overweight kid, loved eating, and I needed to read those menus when we went out to dinner. And so there was like a big payoff for me to be able to read Japanese,
Yeah. How old are you when you were in Japan?
So I was just turning 8, and then I was 12 and a half when we moved back.
Okay.
So, yeah.
And did you have siblings?
Yeah. So I have a younger brother. He's 5 years younger than me. And I was, so like when I was young, and this all developed like in Japan. It was really weird. I had horrendous neurological tics. Like if you see me blinking, like if you ever catch me blinking or scrunching my nose, that's what I've been able to whittle them down to over the years.
Yeah.
But it was like, I would like twitch my arm, or like I'd go like a dolphin in class, and the kids just shit on me mercilessly.
Yeah.
Like, it was that, and I was the fat kid at the same time.
Yeah.
So, and I didn't even like associate it until later that I was just a ball of anxiety.
Yeah.
That was like coming out of me in that way.
Right. So those were like anxious tics that were coming out.
Yeah.
And people were noticing it obviously around you. You were being picked on.
I was being picked on like crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Childhood was weird. Like I can't really pinpoint any areas in my childhood that would have lent to that. But later on, so this is kind of interesting. Actually, when I was writing the book and I was kind of like digging into like trying to, get more clarity on what happened. And so my uncle, my mom's brother, he was my favorite uncle. But before I really he was the first one I smoked a doobie with, like that guy.
Yeah.
But before I really became conscious of the world, he was dealing drugs, and this was in Dallas, and he was selling meth, and he had either a girlfriend or a wife. I don't know if they were married, but who I became real close to as a young kid, like 2 years old. And he sold somebody what they thought was a bad batch, and they kidnapped her, tied her up, raped her, and killed her. And it was like a horrendous family thing. I wasn't really conscious enough of it at the time, but they all had to show up to trial. Like my mom and my dad were very aware of the pictures and everything that was going on, and nobody ever like talked about it. Nobody ever sought help. And so like that energy from that carried into my like formative years.
Wow.
And so I don't have any memory of that, but when I learned about that and knowing what I know now, I went, there's guys, like there's stuff, So
Yeah, when traumatic events happen like that, you feel it.
Oh,
Even though
yeah.
you didn't experience it, you weren't really conscious of what was going on at that time. Or was it before you were even born?
No. I was
Okay.
2 when it happened. And I
Okay.
was very close to the woman that died.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it was like my first loss.
Got it. Got it. Yeah. So yeah, you feel that energy, especially as a kid. And you talked about like being young and a sponge and learning Japanese.
Mm-hmm.
0 to 9 years old, we're really building that foundation of just how we're approaching the world, how we're being in the world. And like that even heightens anxiety more.
Yeah.
That's I'm sorry to hear that. And that's what year was that?
So that was in 85. So
Okay.
I was 2.
Jesus.
Yeah. And it's funny. I asked my mom about it. And, I grew up in a family where it's like, feelings were not a thing. Like we were just moving along, right?
Mm-hmm.
If shit hit the fan, we'd talk about it at dinner. And that was it. That was pretty much, unless somebody was in trouble and then the consequences were recurring. But like that was pretty much what we were doing.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how they handled that. Back in the 80s, I guess maybe it wasn't, as prevalent as it is today, 40 years ago,
No.
Nowadays, you're going to go to 10 years of therapy and,
Right.
take ayahuasca out and freaking Sedona or something. But they weren't doing that back then,
Right.
So anyhow.
So you go to Japan, you move back to Texas?
No, moved back to Tampa.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tampa?
Yeah. And at the time my dad was, so they wanted to move us to Philly and my dad was like, we're not going to Philly. So he had to fly to Philly and Atlanta. I think he commuted to both of those every week. So he wasn't really there for a lot of it was really only a couple of years. So we moved back and we moved into a neighborhood with like kids that I'd kind of known because I played ball as a kid. I was a really good baseball player. It was like my one redeeming quality that I thought, right? I'm like, I was lower than whale shit. And all of my life until you put me on the field and then I was a dick. Like that was basically, the ego just went nuts.
Yeah, you and I both. Yeah.
Yeah. So we get back to Tampa and everyone in the neighborhood is pretty much older than me. Right. And so I fall right into this crowd. And it was within, God, I don't know, 6 months, I took my first drink. And it was I've described the experience probably 100 times. Right. But I heard somebody say one time that like, it's kind of like driving through a rainstorm, a really hard rainstorm, and you go under an overpass, right? And it's quiet for the first time and you go, holy shit. Like I was a problem in search of a solution, but I didn't know it. I had just been feeling that way for so freaking long, And I had the real conscious thought, like, this is so good. Why would I ever want to be sober? And my mom smoked weed, right? So I was rifling through her shit one day, looking for a lighter or something, and I found a big old bag of weed. It was really good. Like it was so good, it made me puke. I didn't know how to roll a doobie or anything. And but within short order, like at 13, I started taking acid. And then I started taking painkillers. I was addicted to painkillers by 15. I was smoking crack by 17. Like the progression was hard.
Holy shit.
Really fast.
So you go from acid to painkillers to crack from basically the age of like 13 to 17.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it progressed. And you were hanging out with older kids.
Yeah. So what happened was my mom and dad got divorced so I was 13, almost 14. Yeah. And I was going to, I was in Tampa. I was going to Christian schools, right? Because they always sent me to like Christian private schools, which, at the time, everyone was kind of conformative. We had our uniforms and shit. And I was like listening to Marilyn Manson, like just trying to buck the system any way that I could, And so anyhow, I found that weed and my mom is like, yo, I don't really have a huge problem with weed. Just don't get arrested. And like a week later, I got arrested. And that started just a string of, dude, I got arrested for smoking pot. I got arrested for stealing from Busch Gardens. A number of arrests started happening at that age. And when they divorced, my mom moved us up to Brooksville. You know where Brooksville is?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. Take 50 straight across.
Yep.
Or that's how you get there from Orlando. And Brooksville is like a cow town. Like there's nothing going on in Brooksville, right? And it was a very strangely segregated type of area. And when I got up there, I realized, I was just entering high school and I realized like my baseball skills were like, I was bigger than everyone, in middle school. And like I can walk on the field, I was head and shoulders above everyone. But when I got up there, I wasn't. Like there were kids with actual skills playing ball. And so I quit. I was like, I'm not fucking doing this anymore. And the football coach approached me. He's like, why aren't you hitting people on my team? Like you should be playing football. Well, I had never played football. Like I kind of knew the rules, but I had never hit anyone on the team. I sucked at football. I was freaking awful. But what did happen on the football team is all the drug dealers in town were on the football team, right? And so I through wearing him down, I convinced a guy to front me a quarter pound of weed. Like, dude, I'll sell this and we're gonna make some money. He's like, I'm already making money, white boy. I don't need this, And so he finally did give me that quarter pound, and I started drug dealing in high school, and it was a weird thing because like my life skill kind of up until that point, because I felt like such a piece of shit, was if you bring something to the party, people will let you hang out because by yourself, they don't want you here. Right. But if you bring some shit, they'll let you stay. And so what better job for, a guy like that than to start selling the things that you need to bring. And so I did. And, it kind of like I had a nickname Ace as a kid, and it got a little bit dangerous. I suppose like the cops would start pulling kids over asking, hey, you know who Ace is? Like, can you buy something from him? Shit like that. And that progressed into me selling ecstasy and basically whatever was on the table. And when I was 16, was I 16? Yeah, I graduated when I was 17. So I was 16 years old. I decided I was going to grow weed in my closet. And, why not? It's a hobby, right? I was a terrible weed grower. There were male plants. I didn't get a single bud off of them. But I had this like elaborate grow light system set up in my closet. And my mom had done my laundry one day, and she went and she hung it up in my closet, and she happened to cover up one of my lights. And about 6:30, 7 p.m., they were hooked up to my light switch on the wall. So I flicked it on, and by 8:30 p.m., I'm sitting on the living room, and I hear a crackle back in my room. And I went and opened my door, and it was like backdraft, like the flames shot out, and our house burned to the ground. When I was 16. Yeah. And I've reflected on that a lot because that was like a really, shit situation as a kid. And I remember my mom wasn't there. I was the only one there. And I remember like really vividly, my neighbor grabbed a hose and was like trying to hose our house off. It wasn't doing anything. And the firefighters and cops show up, and then my mom shows up because she wasn't there, and she's seeing her house burn down. And I didn't even like connect this until later. The only thing she said to me was, "Are you okay?" Like she wasn't concerned about us losing everything, and we were losing everything. So, the self-centeredness that we are like, and I was way in it by that point already.
Yeah.
Way in it. Yeah.
What ended up happening? Did she have fire insurance on the house?
Yeah. So there was insurance.
Okay.
And we had to go into, so like when I graduated high school, we were in a rental that the insurance company put us up in.
Yep.
And she rebuilt the house, and it was nicer than the first one. So it ended up working out. But like all of our stuff from Japan that was irreplaceable, gone, dude. Gone.
And that sits on your shoulders too.
It did.
Subconsciously.
It did for a while.
Yeah.
Because that was my fault. I did that.
Did they ask why that happened?
Oh yeah, they did.
And they figured it all out.
So, no. So it was an electrical fire, and God, I don't even know if I should say this, but they were 2 inches of soot away from finding the buckets that the plants lived in, but they didn't.
Yeah.
That's
wild.
Wild, dude.
Oh my God. All right. So you guys move into this new house. You graduate high school. What do you do after high school?
Yeah. So I went to USF on a Bright Future scholarship, right? And this is where, so the benzos really came into play. Like cocaine and benzos were my chef's kiss, man. That was where I was at with it. So there were these two identical twins in Brooksville that I don't know if they had a pharmacist or what, but they would get me bottles of pills straight from the pharmacy, like you get from the manufacturer. And so I was dating this girl. I'm not even going on that tangent. But I was dating this chick who like, I had stopped selling weed at the time because I had to move and, you know, my parents were really just, I don't think they were happy to get rid of me, but they were happy I wasn't around anymore, you know? And so we went down to, I went down to USF. I moved into the dorm, start selling Xanax, smoking crack, the whole nine, like not going to class. And, you know, they kicked me out of the dorm, right? Obviously, they're going to do that.
How dare they do that?
Assholes. And so and this is kind of like, you know, this really like early in sobriety, this was my first inkling of being able to really relate to the sobriety literature in the first step, right? Where it talks about, so what had happened is I went to live with my dad temporarily. And he said, look, you can't get high in this house. If you get high, you're going to be homeless. You're leaving. That's how it's going to be. And of course I did, right? I went and bought an 8-ball or something. I don't remember what I did. Mm-hmm. But my dad's a really like, you know, he's not a normal dude, but like he's pretty analytical. Like he likes to think things through. He's you know, a business guy. And he sat me down and he said, why did you do it? And, you know, there's a part in the big book that's like, you know, if the alcoholic's really honest with himself, he has no more idea why he did it than you have.
Right.
And I had no idea why I did it. I just, there was something in me that just compelled me. I was at that point, you know, the illusion of control had been there for a while. Like I thought I was controlling this, you know, but really the most control I had was I didn't have any money, like, you know, kind of control it.
Yep.
So anyhow, he did end up putting me up in an apartment, and it took about 18 months for me to fully flunk out just because I was blacked out most of the time and not going to school.
Yeah.
So I moved back to Brooksville. My mom's like, all right, come on back here. So I did that. And I decided I was going to start selling weed again. So that's exactly what I did. And, you know, the timeline's a little fuzzy, but one night I was out shooting pool and I was blacked out on Xanax and decided I was going to go get some crack, which I did. And that's not where the story got weird. The story gets weird when I went to Walmart to buy some cigarettes and I was going over a speed bump and one of my tires popped, right? Now I'm wasted at this point. And I go in, I'm like, all right, I'm going to leave my car here, wait for the tow truck. I'm going to go inside and get some smokes. I'll be right back. So I had a buddy of mine with me and he waited in the car. And I went into Walmart, came out and lost my car. Had no idea where it was. Like an hour and a half goes by. And so I get back to my car and this dude's gone. And what I didn't realize is the tow truck had come and gone as well. And so I'm sitting there with my door open, you know, when you're all barred out, like I got no worries, you know, sitting there with my door open and cops come on and they flash the lights behind me. They're like, you need any help? I said, no, I got a tow truck coming. We're fine. And he starts shining a light and I had a big old bud on the bottom on the ground. And so I had a quarter pound in the backseat and they arrested me with that. And, so, you know, it was just another one of those consequences. Like my mom, I remember her very clearly looking at me. I think I was probably 17 and she held out her wrist and she goes, do you want blood? Because I've got nothing left to give you. You've taken it all from me, you know? So like I never had, some people have like normal drinking, you know, when they're like, hey, I just drank normally and it got out of control. That wasn't my story, man. It was always out of control.
Yeah. Balls to the wall.
Balls to the wall. Totally.
What ended up happening with that quarter pound? Did they arrested you? So
they arrested me and they arrested me with 50 Xanax, but they didn't charge me with the Xanax. And then, dude, I go and pick up my car from impound. They didn't find the crack. Like it was down there, dude. It was crazy. Absolutely crazy.
Did you get out and smoke the crack?
Absolutely. Immediately smoked the crack.
Oh my God.
Immediately. And you know, but this is kind of where my story takes a little bit of a turn.
Yeah.
Because my parents were like, yo, we got to do something with this kid. Like he's gonna die. Mm-hmm. And but they didn't know anything about recovery. You know, they're both drinkers. Like they're like, you know, 5 o'clock is 5 o'clock. Every day you drink. That's kind of how it always was in my family. And so what they did is they talked to my grandma, she was a real religious lady. and they sent me to Teen Challenge. Do you know what that is?
No,
So, you know what Faith Farm is over here, right?
I do.
Similar.
Okay.
Okay. It's like,
For the audience, explain.
yeah. So Teen Challenge is a faith-based, I don't even want to call it a rehab, but it's a program.
Mhm.
And essentially what you do is you go and during the day you work. You're kind of like you're working for them for free and you get room and board.
Mhm.
And then at night you go to church and you read the Bible, right? And so essentially, you know, the idea is if you do this long enough, you're going to have some sort of spiritual experience, which looking back, I can respect that, right? They were saying, okay, here's where we need to get you to. But they never gave me a starting point. They never explained to me what I had, right? If I'm not impressed with the problem, I'm not going to be impressed with your solution to that problem because it's not a problem for me. And so, you know, I was there for 18 months. I worked for him for 6 months after the year program. And I got drunk the day I got out, right? The day I got out, there was no problem solved there whatsoever. You know, I got a lot of good, like religious knowledge. And later on when I was, you know, really getting into the big book, I could kind of tie some of these together and like see where they came from. It was helpful in that way.
Yeah.
But there was no recovery to be had there.
What do you think that program was lacking? I mean, was it just because you were so young?
No, I mean, yeah, that's part of it, right? There's a lot to be said for growing up. But what was that program lacking? I think really what that program was lacking is they would not allow 12-step recovery anywhere near it. And the reason they wouldn't is because it was a Christian program. Anything that was short of you must be a Christian was not allowed. You know, and that was a big disservice, like to the men that were really, really hurting and needing a solution in there.
Right.
You know, like me.
Right.
I was.
So, okay, then I'm going to push you a little further here.
Yeah.
Then what does a 12-step program offer that this place was not offering?
Yeah. So, I mean, really, really clearly, right? So if I call you up, Kevin, and I say, hey, man, how do I get to Georgia? Right. The first question you should ask me is, where are you now? I got to get a really clear impression of where I'm starting from if I know where I'm going. AA is very good with that, but even more so, man. I said it. It's fine.
Yeah.
We're gonna roll.
Yeah.
But even more than that is they had no design for living. It you know, and I kind of got a little bit soiled on the religious aspect of it because it was like an Assemblies of God, which is kind of like, you know, they're like out there.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, of course.
They're not Southern Baptists, but they're out there.
Yep.
And the same guys in every church service would like flop around on the floor like a fish and like do all this weird stuff. And I was like, you know, it just didn't land on me. It didn't land on me. Not that I didn't believe it, I was like, this is weird, you know? So I had no idea what I was up against.
Right.
No idea.
Right. So I do want to clarify for the listeners too. Listen, religion does get people sober.
Totally.
100%. You got sober in a 12-step program. I got sober in a 12-step program. I'm not here saying 12-step is the only way because it's not. I've had people come on here who got sober off of Reddit chats.
Yeah.
Like, seriously.
Awesome.
I mean, good for them.
Yeah.
I believe in the 12-step way because that's how I got sober, right? So if it happened with me, I believe it. 12-step is not a religious program. It's a spiritual program. I don't want people to also be afraid of 12-step programs. Totally. So there are a lot of different ways, but if you want to bring religion into a 12-step program, you can.
Go for it.
That's up to you. So there are no rules and regulations, and I wanted to clarify that for the listener because I don't want to scare anyone away from religion, and I don't want to scare anyone away from the 12-step program because it works wonders for people.
Well, and even in the 12-step program, it says, you know, see where men of religion are right. Like right. Take some stuff that they have to offer because it's good.
Yeah.
It's absolutely good.
Yeah.
And it was the foundation of our program.
Yeah.
You know.
So you get out of this religious prison. No,
yeah. No, it kind of was.
It was almost like a religious rehab.
Right.
But you get out. How old are you and what do you do next?
Yeah. So I turned, let's see, how old was I? I turned 20 in there. And then I get out and I go back to Brooksville, right? I got nothing going on. I go back to Brooksville and immediately start getting high. I start selling furniture at this, you know, little furniture store there, right? It was the best job I could get. And around this time, I'm living with my mom, you know, and my uncle, that same uncle. So they go out of town for something. I don't remember why my parents went out of town. But while they were out of town, my stepdad had like this box of quarters for he would play poker with it, right? And I stole his box of quarters. There was no chance I wasn't getting caught. And I remember like handing the dealer this giant bag of quarters. I'm like, just go to Coinstar, man. It's fine, right? And I got high with it. And they came back and they're like, you can't stay here. So there's this little campground in Brooksville called Croom, where people like ride dirt bikes and stuff. And they gave me a tent and they're like, go live there. And so I did for 5 days. And I'm there and I started making up my own story to anyone that would listen, that I was going into the Navy and I was out here for training, so I would get people to give me beers and shit. And during this time, my uncle came into town, and like him and my mom come and see me 5 days later. And I'm like sitting there kicked up by the fire having a beer. And they're like, well, you're supposed to be like atrocious. Like you're supposed to be, in trouble here. So anyhow, they bring me back home and I get to spend, I don't know, maybe 12 hours with my uncle before he leaves. And a week and a half or 2 weeks later, it's about 10:30 in the morning. And I get a call from my grandma. And she's screaming on the other end of the phone. Doug's been shot. And that's my uncle. And the girlfriend that he was dating, the woman that was just there at our house, and he was a bad alcoholic, grabbed a gun and shot him in the chest. Right. So my uncle got murdered. And I guess I was probably 20 or 21 when that happened. Right. And so at this point, I needed to get out of the house. Like my mom and stepdad had a lot going on. Clearly, there was just a lot of shit happening, and I was not helping the situation at all. So they, I ended up renting this trailer in Brooksville for $400 a month, and it just became my drug den. I remember turning 22, and it was about 2 p.m. on my birthday, and nobody had talked to me. Like they wanted nothing to do with me, And I was dating this girl, and she showed up with some meth that night as a birthday present, which was nice of her. And we're sitting there in my living room smoking meth, and my mom and my little brother walk in with a cake. Like they hadn't talked to me all day. They were planning on showing up and doing something sweet. And here I am getting high. And my mom just loses her mind and starts screaming at the girlfriend, like, what do you want to do? Why are you with him? He's a junkie and a drug addict. Like that tattooed on my brain, that moment. And 3 days later, I was on my way to rehab. My grandfather had offered it. And in true like alcoholic fashion, I said, well, let me think about it. I'll get back to you on that.
Yeah, of
but
course.
I was clearly like a whacked out junkie at that point. And somebody had given my mom good advice, which is go get his ass and put him in the car. Otherwise, you're going to be burying him, which that was right. That was true, And so my very first introduction to AA was September 2nd, 2005.
September 2nd, 2005. And you go into rehab that day. Okay. What was rehab like for you? You're probably 22 at this point.
Almost. I just turned 23.
Okay.
Like 3 weeks earlier.
Okay. So you're 23 years old. You go to rehab for the first time.
Yeah.
What was that like?
So, when you go into rehab, the first thing they have you do is like you go see like a doctor, right? They want to, do your whole medical. Somehow I had convinced a regular doctor a few weeks earlier to give me a script of Klonopin. And I convinced that doctor to give me Klonopin while I was in rehab. Absolutely ridiculous, right? So from jump, I had no shot, right? The allergy was active. It was still active within me. But I remember going to my first meeting, and I was such an arrogant kid, man. I shared 3 times in my first AA meeting. I'll bet they wanted to kill me, because I'd somehow gotten the life skill that like, if you don't know something, kind of act like you do. I don't know where that came from. But I was, I remember my therapist asked me to write a paper on humility. And I went away and I wrote this 4-page masterpiece on humility. And I was so excited to present it to her because I knew she was just going to be like, yeah, way to go, Austin. And she crumpled it up and threw it in the trash without even reading it. And I was like, you bitch. And she said, you missed the whole point, dude. It wasn't about writing a great paper on humility. It was about learning something about humility. But that just went over my head at the time, And so my grandmother passed away 4 days before I'm supposed to get out of this rehab. And of course, as rehabs do, they discharge you with your medication when you leave, right? So I had these, the sheets, the punch out, like 3 sheets of Klonopin. So I hop on a Greyhound to go to the Villages, which is where my grandmother and grandfather lived. Mm-hmm. And I'm blacked out like 30 minutes into the trip. And my grandfather just paid for rehab. And so I get to the Villages. And somehow I got the bright idea that I was going to steal my grandfather's golf cart and pawn it for crack. But do you know anything about the Villages?
I don't.
Okay, so the Villages is the largest retirement community in the United States. It's massive. It's like huge in Central Florida.
Yeah.
Everyone's old, right? And so I thought I was going to steal his golf cart and pawn it for crack. But the problem was, there's no hood in the Villages, and nor did I know anybody there to buy a golf cart, right? So I leave blacked out, and on the morning of my grandmother's funeral, my mom and grandfather have to send a tow truck to pick me up because I ran out of battery in this freaking golf cart, right? And it's such a tragic, like, to think from their perspective. Now looking back at that, like, holy shit, dude, no thought about the consequences whatsoever, mm-hmm. None, right? So I go to my grandmother's funeral, and the next day I'm coming down to North Palm, to a place called the Freedom House, which I don't think is there anymore. I don't think it's there. And so my dad takes me down to Tampa. He goes to take a nap at about 2 p.m. and somehow I had gotten $200 in my pocket. So when he goes to sleep, I hop in a cab and I go down to 22nd Street, which back when I was in high school, that's where you went to cop, in Tampa. Mm-hmm. And I'm in my funeral clothes, right? So I'm, in slacks and a collared shirt, and I'm walking around trying to buy dope, and nobody will sell to me. 22nd had been a little bit gentrified by that point, right? And finally, after like a half hour of me hanging out at this store, these 2 guys walk up to me, one really overweight guy and one skinny guy. And the skinny guy had a shirt on that said "No snitching at any time." And I was like,
that's my guy.
That's my guy, right? And so he puts 5 bags of individual rocks in my hand, which was strange. But I didn't have much time to think about it because within 30 seconds I was face up against the bricks because the cops were rushing from across the street. It was a sting. And so that started 30 days in Falkenberg jail in Tampa, right? And so there's a lot going on in this time period. But that was the first real, like, personal consequence that I could latch onto, was I'm now in jail. Mm. And I had my bond wasn't that high. It was like $5,000 or something. Nobody would bail me out. This was over Thanksgiving 2005. Yeah. Yeah.
What was it like being in jail for the first time? What shocked you the most?
So there's 2 jails in Tampa. There's Orient Road and Falkenberg. And Orient Road is like jail cells, and Falkenberg is a dorm. So I was in the dorm. And they didn't even have a bunk for me. I had to sleep on what they called a boat. It was on the floor, this plastic thing. And it was freaking loud in there, hooting and hollering all day long. And I really, like, even at this time, I'm like, I don't deserve to be here. I just wanted to get high. Like, I was still in that, it's not my fault mentality, even though it was quite clearly my fault. Mm-hmm. Like, I was there. But I had the opportunity to, like, read some books and to do the stuff you can do when there's a lot of time on your hands, and I had some information that I got from a rehab, which was the first time I had any inkling of information, right? So I started to kind of make some connections that, okay, I'm like this and I don't have to be like this, but I don't know how to get out of this, And so I got released after 30 days, and my dad took me down to North Palm and he said, "Good luck." And they paid 2 weeks of my rent and they left. And it was on me from that point, And that's when things started to change, at least temporarily, mm-hmm. right? So I get in here and I didn't know what to do. And the guys, they're going to Oasis Club over here, and they're going to meetings, right?
Yes,
and so,
that's my home group.
Yeah, that was my home group too.
Yeah.
And so we go up to Oasis, and I didn't, like, I was, and maybe to some degree I still am today, but at that time I was deathly afraid of being authentic with other people. Like, I could not tell you what was really going on with me because my entire sense of self was made up in what I thought you thought of me.
Yeah.
But I did put my hand up and I shared about these dreams I was having where I would like cop dope, and just before I'd get the lighter to the end of the pipe, I'd wake up. Exactly.
Yeah,
dude.
I went through
Exactly.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I shared that, and this dude came up to me. His name's Paul, who played a big role in my story. But what he said to me wasn't the words I said to him. He told me his own story. And it was the first time that I can consciously remember going, I'm not alone. And that I'm not alone feeling has so much power for guys like us.
Yeah.
You know, so much power.
Yeah.
And he got me ripping on the steps, and he had a sponsor named Greg, who was this fireman, and I don't even know if he's still around here. He probably isn't, but like, you know what Big Book Step Study is?
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay. So that was what I was in initially for a long time. And, you know, I've since gotten some different ideas around it, but again, just like Teen Challenge, it gave me a lot of really good understanding, you know, of the Big Book. But so it was almost kind of like a militant AA.
Yeah. You do it in a very quick period of time.
Yeah, you do it in quick, but it's like you can't talk until you're through the steps, right? And it's a real specific thing, and you know, anyhow. So I was a part of that for a while, and I started so I ended up getting married, right, in 2008. Not necessarily because I wanted to get married, but because I felt like, okay, that's just the next thing that you do. Like, that's what my dad had always said. You go to college. Well, I failed at that. You get married, right? Okay, well, I'm going to do that. And you have kids, like, in that order.
Were you sober this whole time, though?
Yeah. So
when you went to Oasis Group, when you were living in North Palm, your dad dropped you off. You stayed sober up until
not continuously. I had a one-night relapse.
Okay.
All right. What had happened was and granted, it's tough to call it a relapse. I had 2 years.
Yep.
But I had gone online and ordered some Klonopin and Vicodin. Right. And I had 3 weeks between the point of ordering that and it arriving to tell somebody. And I remember opening my book to read 84 through 88 one morning and going, why are you even doing this? Like, what's the point, dude? What's the point? And it arrived, and I took it, and my girlfriend at the time, who ended up being my wife, was like, she caught me, and she's like, you got to call your sponsor. And so I got a white chip, right? And that was April 14th, 2017.
But wait, April 14th, 2017?
2007.
Okay.
Sorry. 2007.
Okay.
Yeah,
Like,
thank you. Keep my timeline correct. Yeah. 2007.
Okay. Got it. Got it. Okay. And then
2007.
after that, then you stayed sober up until you ended up getting married.
So I got married in 2008.
Okay.
Yep. And
congratulations.
Thank you. First, I've been married 3 times.
I know.
Yeah. First marriage. And my daughter was born in 2011. And just before she was born, I started a business that became very successful.
What kind of business was it?
I'll tell you, but you got to cut this part.
We could talk about it after. That's
okay.
fine.
All right, cool.
All right. So you started a business, very successful.
Very successful. There's a lot of these businesses around South Florida.
Got it.
Yeah. It became, so anyhow, I start like living my dreams, right? Like I'm sober in AA multiple years. I'm married. I got a kid now, but I'm a very absent father, because what had happened in AA is I started to realize that I could go balls to the wall in this. I said it multiple times, whatever, who cares? I could go balls to the wall in this and get that positive feedback I had always hoped for, like my whole life, right? And so I started like listening to speaker tapes and decide, and, trying to figure out how I could be a really good speaker and all sorts of stuff, right?
Yeah.
And so we started making money hand over fist, like crazy. And
are you justifying you not being there with the kid as like you're the breadwinner and you're providing?
Oh, not just the bread. Like my example of what parenting was, the father's gone working, the mother's home with the kids. I never knew anything about emotional development, emotional EQ, that sort of thing. I didn't know how to parent. I had no idea. I thought it was like just keep them alive sort of thing. And so fast forward a little bit, this business continues to do well. And I decide all of my sponsees with 5 years, I'm going to hire them, because it didn't happen all at once. It happened over time, but I ended up hiring 4 of my long-term, sober sponsees. And And then I decided I'm going to get into the vape industry. The vape store that I started is still over off of all day one day. Anyhow, and I decided I'm going to put my sponsor, Paul, in charge of that. What could go wrong by dismantling your entire support system, right?
Oh, but you probably justified it. I now have this support system all around me.
Well,
so I'm bulletproof.
Kind of.
Yeah.
I had them all around me, but I justified it that I was doing something really kind for the people I loved.
Yeah.
That's how I justified it, you know? And so at that point, I was unwilling to be honest. You know, I was hiding in the front of the rooms, basically, you know, by I know the book. This guy must be doing all these things. I'm not taking a nightly inventory. I'm not doing 10 steps. I'm not, you know, just all the things, right? I'm not doing it. And I picked up a little gambling habit. It was small. I don't want to make it was huge. And I'd be down at the Hard Rock a couple times a week, right? And you know, out in Vegas, and you know, the thing about the casinos is they know how to play to the arrogant, egotistical human, right? And they played me like a fiddle, and it was, you know, I loved it. And my wife at the time said to me, if you keep gambling, I'm out of here. And I hopped on a plane to Vegas, right? And I had just gotten sick at that time. I had just, you know, the gifts that AA had given me, that the program had given me, like I had just whittled my way out of them by trying to look like I was doing it, but not really doing it. You know, there's a guy I know who says, you know, if you've got the information, but you're not having the experience, it's like going to a restaurant and eating the menu. It's not the point, you know. And I was eating the menu at that point, had no power in it. And so I go out to Vegas and you know, I'm in the high roller room gambling with these dudes, and one dude is leaving, and he's like, "Yo, I left you a present in the bathroom," and he left me a bag of blow. And it was time. It was time. And so I did that, came back to Florida, told Paul, because I was like, "Paul, come to Vegas with me," and he did. I was like, "Paul, I'm going to get high," and so I went over to Singer Island, locked myself in a room for a few days, and got high. And this started a progression of multiple rehab stints. Right, the first one they sent me to out in Arizona, they're like, "Well, let's send him to a gambling rehab because clearly gambling's his problem." Gambling wasn't my problem because as soon as I got high, I quit gambling. I wanted to get high.
Yep.
You know, that's what it was.
Yep.
And I come back and my first wife and I are on the rocks, and, you know, things are not going well between us. And I pick up Kratom, you know, which, you know, oh, I can get away with this, you know, go to AA meetings, take a little Kratom, you know, that's not how it works, man. Not for me. You know, maybe some people can do that, but dude, you kick me off in any way and I'm going to obsess nonstop. That's how my brain just goes. And eventually I just went on a hard run of, you know, just a very, very hard run, which culminated in me overdosing in the Fort Lauderdale Hard Rock.
Can you tell us that story?
Yeah, definitely, bro. So I'm in the Hard Rock in Fort Lauderdale, and I had heroin, a bunch of crack, and what I thought was Molly wasn't Molly. It was bath salts. So this is in 2014, I guess. And so I put some of what I thought was Molly in a tissue to swallow it, and I swallowed it. And I'm like sitting in the bathtub with this big glass tray and my pipes and everything. I feel like Tony Montana over there, right? And I'm smoking crack, and I stand up and my legs don't work. They give out from under me and I drop everything and it shatters. And the next memory I have is looking up, and this is hours later, at the cleaning lady who had come in. And she's radioing for somebody, right? And then she leaves, and I get up and I take a leak, and I pissed out Coca-Cola. I kid you not, it was brown. And at this point, they had already had a rehab picked out for me. It was called Promises. You ever heard of Promises?
Yeah, of course.
So they had a second part to it that I don't know if it's still there. It's called Promises for Professionals. I wasn't a professional. I just happened to be successful in like some business shit, right? Mm-hmm. And I go, dude, I got to get on a plane. I got to go to Promises. And these 2 giant security guards come up to my door and they say, you're not going anywhere. You are sleeping for 48 hours. Which, only at the Hard Rock would I be able to overdose. And then they would be like, just stay a few more days. Like, it's fine. No big deal. So I hop on. I finally do get to Promises. And dude, I'm like whacked at this point. Like, I think everyone with a GPS antenna is the feds. Like, I'm losing my mind. And I get to detox out in LA, and I was in renal failure. Like, they had to pump me for 12 days. I had to detox, mainly because I was taking a shitload of pills. Like, the pills were they just kind of went hand in hand, right? Mm-hmm. So I go out to Santa Monica, which is where Promises is, and again, they're treating me special, right? And they actually diagnosed me as a narcissist with sociopathic tendencies. That was the diagnosis I got.
Who, me?
Yeah.
No way.
No, but I laughed at it, mainly because I didn't know what it meant.
Yeah.
I didn't understand like really what they were saying.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm in there with like anesthesiologists and like the vice president of Vodafone and like all these people out in LA that are people. And I'm not that. I'm just a dude that happened to have some success, right? And so while I'm out there, I get a call from the MGM Grand like 3 weeks in, and they're like, we got your room ready for this week. And I'm like, I'm not coming out there. What are you talking about? And they said, no, your wife booked it. So I do some research, and my wife had relapsed, and she had booked my MGM Grand account for her and her crack dealer. And she was going to go to Vegas. So I called her up, and I'm reading her the riot act. And my therapist said, you can divorce this woman. Now, we had 2 kids at the time. Right. My son, Zachary, had been born. I think he was 6 months. He was young. She said, you can divorce this woman. And I said, that wouldn't be fair to the kids. And she point blank told me, she said, it's not fair to the kids now. Like, your parents are caring for them, and she had a point. And so I had my lawyer drop the documents, and there was this girl that was working there named Katrina. I'll tell you about Katrina. Katrina was short, with long hair down to her ass, cute girl, and a lesbian. Had been a lesbian for years prior, and I was on the phone with my first wife, telling her I was divorcing her, and I watched her head flip around like that, Katrina. I went, well, I noticed it. I know she noticed it, And fast forward a little bit, Katrina ends up moving back to Florida with me. And there was a couple of things I didn't know about Katrina. At the time, she had 7 years sober. She was working at the rehab, and I had like 30 days, go figure. And a couple of things I didn't know about Katrina. One is that she came from a mafia family. So her last name prior to me meeting her was Gambino. And she had grown up like by her words, watching people get eaten by pigs and shit like that. So she had a lot of trauma. But the other thing I didn't know is she had a wicked case of drug-induced schizophrenia that was completely under control because she hadn't been doing drugs in 7 years. Right. So we get back, I start taking like Adderall, eventually smoking crack, and I set this girl off. Like, she becomes, and we got married. Like, I prenupped her, thank God. But we got married. Like, I got divorced on December 3rd and married her December 4th of 2013 or 14. I don't remember which, probably 14. And so that starts a major run that ends up with me and her in a hotel in Fort Lauderdale. I'm sitting on the toilet naked, about to shoot heroin, crack, bongs everywhere, and the cops bust in the door. And it was Fort Lauderdale sheriffs. I had been Marchman acted by my dad and my little brother. And for anyone that doesn't know what a Marchman Act is, it's essentially where, like, if you're using and drinking to the point that you're going to kill yourself or somebody else, they can get the courts involved and force you to go to rehab. Mm-hmm. And so that's what they did. And so I go in front of the magistrate, and she sentences me to Renaissance in Boca, which was a pretty hardcore rehab.
Yep.
Yeah.
No, it's great, actually.
It's really good.
It's really,
yeah.
It's Karen's.
Yeah, totally.
Brother location down here.
Yeah. Like, if you want to get sober, great place.
Yes.
But I'm in there, and after about 3 days, Katrina's like, yo, I want to come there too. And I said, oh, okay. So will you guys please let my wife come in? And they said, no, your wife can't come in. That's the most ridiculous thing ever. So I said, well, what if I gave you 20 grand cash? Would you let her come in? I said, okay, she can come in. And she did. And after she was there for about 3 days, she said, the judge only said we had to go to rehab. The judge didn't say you necessarily had to go to this rehab. Why don't we go back out to California? You can go to Promises. Now, in my mind, that made complete sense to me. So we grabbed our bags, which happened to have passports in them. And they're like, we're calling the cops. I'm like, call them. We hopped in an Uber and we headed down to Fort Lauderdale with the intention of going to California. And at the last minute, I called an audible and we hopped on a plane to Cancun.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
So you tried to escape the country so that they couldn't get you.
I didn't want to do it. I had a bunch of money and I wasn't done. And so we get to Cancun and I'm not buying grams. Like, I'm like, where can I get ounces and more? Right. And Cancun, you ever been to Cancun?
Of course.
Yeah. Okay. You know the party zone?
Yep.
Okay, great. I lived right at the start of the party zone in a building called Salvia. And Cancun's interesting. It has a general level of peace only because the Sinaloa cartel runs all of it.
Mm-hmm.
All of it. And as soon as I got there and started buying, they brought me in, right? And they
Caught their attention.
Yeah. And they started putting me up in their places. This is before I moved into Salvia. And everyone I'm hanging out with is cartel. As long as you've got money, they're going to treat you exactly like the casinos would treat me,
mm-hmm.
And so, Katrina's nuts at this point. Like, she gets booted out of the building that we're living in because she went downstairs. There were red flags out on the beach, so people couldn't go swimming because of the tide. And she thought the red flags were actually preventing people from swimming. So she pulled them all out of the beach and came out onto our 4th floor balcony and told everyone she had saved them. And the building booted her, right? These guys are taking me to strip clubs and like, you can just sit in VIP and smoke crack. And they're shuttling me up a kilo about every 8 weeks, right? And every now and again, I'd get a wild hair up my ass and decide I wanted to like shoot cocaine, which I did fairly regularly, but not that much. And because it would make me hallucinate really, really bad.
Mm-hmm.
And that started a string of me, like essentially what they would do is they would bring hookers in and I didn't want to have sex with them. I wanted people that were as miserable as me to just be with me and like get high with me, And I joke sometimes, but I was so delusional at the time. I remember like telling a hooker in Spanish. My Spanish wasn't that good, but like, if you just keep close to God and perform his work well, he'll provide what you need, like that shit, like I'm spitting big book at him. And it was, there was one time I was on an island called Isla Mujeres, which is right off the coast of Cancun. And I got a picture of me with these girls from one of my handlers. And he said, dude, they're coming to get you. You have been spending money on this island and they're like, what had happened was my handler had gotten a text from somebody else in the cartel that said, we're going to go kidnap this white boy. We're going to go get him. And it was like a mad dash to get off the island, And so I'm going to fast forward a little bit here. So, Mexico is Mexico, right? And I had no known enemies to my use. There were no cops that were going to mess with me because they were all cartel. There were no parents or friends that were going to step in and stop me. And I got to use as much as I wanted until the money ran out.
How long were you in Mexico for?
So total time in Mexico was about 20 months.
Okay.
And what had really, and I'm convinced to this day, what had kept me alive was my Xanax habit. So I had a 50 milligram per day Xanax habit, 25 bars a day. In addition to, an ounce of crack every day, drinking the whole 9. But I'm pretty sure that kept my heart beating.
You were taking 25 2-milligram bars, so 50 milligrams of Xanax every single day.
Yeah.
On top of smoking crack, shooting crack, taking it every which way.
Yeah.
Heroin, everything.
Actually, there was no heroin there at the time.
Oh, and okay.
And that may have kept me alive too.
Yeah.
Had opiates come into play, I don't know what would happen.
Yeah.
How
do you, so that the money ends up running out?
Yeah. So when I came to Mexico about 5 months into me being there, everyone who worked for me was my little brother, my sponsees. We had a massive month. They closed the doors because I wasn't there anymore and they weren't going to continue to fuel my habit. And so a multi-million-dollar business, I ended up selling for like 35 grand to 2 employees of mine up in Canada. And it's still in existence today. And it makes a lot of money, but not for me.
Oh my God.
So
How much do you think you spent in Mexico total?
Oh, it was well in excess of $1 million. I don't know the numbers, but I know I was still making like 150 grand a month when I moved there. And so I still got that for the first like 5 months.
Oh my God.
And Mexico ends in a really kind of interesting way. So the Xanax, so Paul shows up to Cancun. He's like, bro, you're in trouble. I'm going to take you back to the States and get you detoxed from the Xanax. They were very concerned about the Xanax, and with good reason. So I come back and I go to a detox in Okeechobee, and I get out of there fully detoxed, right? And just go back to drinking and using here. Decide I'm going to get some credit cards and like pull the cash out of those. And I went back. I went back to Mexico.
Cash advanced them all.
Boom, gone.
And then you went back with all the cash to Mexico.
Yeah.
And then
I moved to Playa del Carmen, and right, which is just about 30, 45 minutes from Cancun. And because I thought that was going to be more chill. Cancun was the problem. Clearly, it wasn't the problem. I was the problem. And while I'm there, Yvonne, who's one of my like handlers at the time, we decided to go to Mexico City to party. And I had been to Mexico City prior, and there's this girl there named Fabi who had just fallen in love with me. A good girl. Like, she didn't smoke crack. She didn't do anything. And I don't know what she saw in me. I don't know what it was, but she just fell in love with me. And we go back to Mexico City. Now, I want to preface this by saying, so in Mexico City, there's a gigantic flea market, for lack of a better term, and it's called Tepito, right in the middle of the city. And Tepito sells everything, including drugs. There's multiple streets you can walk down and buy almost any drug, and it's ran by the Union Cartel in Mexico. And the cops don't mess with you, right? It's just, that's how it is. So Mexico City copping was not too difficult either, right? And so I go to Mexico City to party. And by this point, I had fake Mexican credentials. I was a Mexican citizen for all intents and purposes. And Katrina had been deported back to the United States. The Mexican government kicked her out because she was so nuts. And
so you shook her.
She's gone.
Okay.
Yeah, I had multiple girlfriends after her.
Okay, got it.
That I start, just whatever. I had my wallet stolen while we were in Mexico City. So I was stuck. I couldn't get back on a plane to Cancun. So Yvonne was like, yo, I'm going to go back to Cancun. I'm going to get your passport. I'm going to mail it to you. It took days, and I was living at his dad's house. And so I called Fabi. And by this point, the money I was down to my last 15,000 pesos, which is not much. Mm-hmm. And I called Fabi and I said, Fabi, I'm in Mexico City and I'm stuck here. And she said, is this a joke? I said, no, I'm here. And she says, all right, you come live with me and my mom. So she lived in this little city called Coacalco, which is it's in the state of Mexico, outside of Mexico City. So I hop in a cab and we go out, and it's getting progressively worse as we get out there, like impoverished, you can tell. And I pull up to what would here be considered a projects. There, it was just where people lived, right? And she's meeting me. She's dressed to the nines. She's meeting me outside, and she's going to walk me in to meet her mother and live with her mother. And I'm like this crackhead American dude, And we start walking, and we, there's like the laundry's out on the lines and everything's like green, like, it's weird. And I get into her house, and I already knew this about Fabi, but then I met her mom, and I met two of the happiest, sweetest, most loving people I'd ever met. Mexicans are very family oriented,
Yeah.
Their rent was $150 a month, and they had dinner waiting for me, and, the second day there, I asked Fabi if I could take a shower, and she says, yeah, hang on a second, in Spanish. Her English wasn't very good. My Spanish wasn't very good. It made for a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And she had to go to the stove and boil water because they didn't have hot water. And that's how she had been showering probably her whole life, right? And so in the span of a couple of years, I had gone from, very successful sober in the United States to showering out of a bucket in Mexico City. And I think I learned the most from Fabi and her mom in that time, and that I've been chasing all of these things. Like, when I was a kid and I would hit home runs, I'd see pride in my dad's eyes, right? And the message that I got was that if I accomplish, people will love me, right? And so I set on this journey to just accomplish, to be the best person in the program, and to make the most money, and to be the most successful, and And when it didn't fill that hole inside of me, I blew it up, you know? And then I get to Mexico City and I meet these two people who they never had an iPhone. Like they couldn't even fathom that, you know? And they were content. They were happy in their life, you know? And I went, wow, man, I was chasing the whole thing wrong, you know? And the biggest tragedy is that, you know, I had 2 kids at the time. And I remember my first wife saying to me, if you keep drinking and losing, you're gonna lose us, all of us. And I knew I was gonna go, and I did. And the only, you know, you ever like, I had older friends. I think I mentioned that earlier, right? When I was a kid, and we would swim, and sometimes these bigger kids would like grab me and hold my head underwater, right? In that moment of panic, like, oh, I gotta breathe. This guy's gonna kill me. When the addiction is active in my brain, that's really what it feels like. I have to get the next one. And I love my kids as much today as I loved them then, but they were in the way and I had to go, you know? And,
How long were you with Fabi and her mom?
yeah, so I guess we call it dated. I was with Fabi and her mom for 8 months.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then after, what year is this now?
So this is end of 2015, beginning of 2016.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then do you eventually, after that 8-month, go back to Playa del Carmen?
No.
Or do you go back to the States?
So Fabi and I's relationship started getting kind of volatile, probably because like I kept telling her when the drugs run out, I'm leaving. And she kept saying, oh, we're going to get married and have kids. And I'd be like, no, we're not. I got to go, you know? And eventually it started getting violent between the two of us. And on my birthday in 2016, I was just a dick. Like, you know, she had made me a beautiful cake and I ate it before she could sing me happy birthday. And she got real mad about that. And I understand why. And we went upstairs and I was like drinking a 40 and she clocked me upside the head and I dropped the beer on the ground and I said, that's it, we're done. And I went and lived with my dealer, Juanito, for a few days. And I called a buddy of mine back in, he lived in Boynton and who I had helped into the business that I had started earlier. And he sent me enough money to pay off my drug dealer. And eventually I made my way back to the States about 5 or 6 days later.
So 2016, you moved back to the States.
Yeah.
What do you end up doing from there?
Yeah. So I almost didn't make it out of Mexico because I had to pay like a tax. I had to bum money off somebody in the Mexico City airport to like get me out of the country.
Yeah.
And I land back here. It's like 11 a.m. And I know it was August 26th because I see the Facebook post come up every single year. And the Facebook post says, I have nothing left in the world. And I'm pretty grateful right now. Like it was the first time I had, you know, felt some form of gratitude in a little bit. And so I land and Lou, the guy that had paid for me to get back up here, picks me up. And he takes me down to Isla Morada because he's going fishing with a bunch of buddies. So we go fishing for a few days. And I'm like, what the fuck is going on right now, right? And he starts saying, hey, this is Austin. He's the guy that got me into the business. I owe a lot for him and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, dude, you know, so I was coming off of a 2-year crack run. And you know, if there was a window of humility, it slammed shut real quick, you know? And so Lou still had a very successful business in that industry. And so I said to him, I said, you know, maybe I can come on and take a look at things and see if I can increase revenue. And he's like, you probably can, come on, you know? And so I quickly slid back into, you know, business. And I somehow had convinced myself, well, you know, you had a lot of time in the program, buddy. You've got the information. Let's just, you know, no harm, no foul. Maybe things are okay. And through a series of events and of course, you know, money chasing, I found myself in the Homing Inn. You know where that is?
No.
It's in Delray. It is a shithole. In the Homing Inn, shooting fentanyl and smoking crack. And this is March of 2017, right?
Okay.
And so in March of 2017, I go to detox and I go to rehab. And this starts the actual genuine, like new recovery journey for me. And something interesting happened in there. I had, you know, the therapists were great, right? And I'm a believer in rehab. Like it's a good thing. But this was the first time that I had like talked about Mexico. Like I had told my story prior to Mexico a bajillion times. And I'd always like, you know, I would weave jokes in there because if you're telling it to a room, you know, you got to keep them entertained. But I remember telling people about Mexico and the people that I had hurt, and my body started physically shaking. Like the anxiety and the pain of actually acknowledging what had happened was immense. And interesting thing happened. My therapist came in one day and she had a picture of a baby, which was her baby, and she taped that picture to the wall, and she said, "What does that baby have to do to deserve love?" You know, and of course everyone was like, "Well, nothing. That's a baby." And she started making the very strong argument that the only difference between that baby and me was an idea, and I was the only one that had that idea. And something started happening at that point, right? I had lost everything in the world. I had no money to lean on. I had no reputation to lean on. I had no business. I was, in fact, broken at that time. And I got out, went to a halfway house, started working at the halfway house, and entered into Delray AA, man, which is, I love it, right? It's awesome. And at about 9 months sober, you know, of course, it was time to start dating, right? And I set up a Bumble profile, and my wife found me on Bumble, you know, and her and I started dating in 2017, and in 2018 we got married, and I got custody back of my 2 kids in 2018, and
Because you'd been sober the whole time.
I had been sober up until that point, yeah. And I didn't know how to be a dad. Like I didn't know how to parent these children. You know, I thought park them on an iPad, feed them chicken nuggets, like get them to school, and you're doing your job. Haley, my wife, is, you know, she showed me what a parent really is. And I, you know, my parents loved me a lot, and they still do, but they gave me what they had. You know, Haley had something different, something entirely different that still to this day kind of baffles me a little bit. But she, you know, she's been the one that's pulled me into learning what it means to be a father, not a parent. A parent is somebody who just is like, you know, knocking down problems and, you know, checking boxes. You know, a father is something completely different. And in the program, we, you know, we talk a lot about the relationship with a higher power, and it's synonymous in a lot of ways, you know. And so, and in 2019, we moved to Orlando because she's from Winter Park, and we get there, and my sobriety had been really like some of the best sobriety of my life up until that point. Like, because I had to form genuine relationships with people. I had nothing to like manipulate their opinion of me with, and what I found out was when I actually gave people me, that was enough. And not only was it enough, it was like, it was what people actually wanted, because we can sniff bullshit, you know. Like, there's something about the genuine, authentic person that like just hits you in the heart, you know. And so we move up to Orlando, and you know, my ass wasn't on fire at that time. You know, we had moved up, and we got the kids and money problems. I don't know what to do for money because I was afraid to go back into the business again and things like that. And a little Circle K was selling Kratom. And this is like the whack part of it, right? Like I've got the information. I know that if I alter my mind from the neck up in any way, shape, or form, I'm going to kick off the craving. I'm going to kick off the obsession. It's going to happen. And it did. You know, it did. But I managed to string it out for a couple of months. And then my next sobriety date was, I had a lot of March sobriety dates, was March 4th, 2020.
Okay.
Right.
Really quick, before you go into the March 4th, 2020, can you explain, because Kratom is a huge problem right now.
Yeah.
It's a huge problem. A lot of people are hooked on it. A lot of people, quote unquote, get sober or stay abstinent and then start using Kratom and then just live off of Kratom.
Yeah.
Can you explain what Kratom did to you and how you kind of fell into that, went down that rabbit hole with it?
Yeah, absolutely. So Kratom is it's not an analog of an opiate, but it kind of makes you feel like an opiate, at least for a little while, right? And there's so many justifications out there. Oh, it's related to the coffee plant and all this shit, right? But it genuinely addicts your body, right? It does. And for me, as a real alcoholic, right, that has alcoholism, which there's a difference, right? Alcoholism starts where the bag and the bottle end. It's what happens to me when you take the alcohol and drugs away from me. That's the alcoholism. And Kratom will calm that. Right. It'll calm that for a little while. but it 100% in my brain kicked off the desire for more, the constant desire for more. And any growth that I might have been experiencing immediately stopped. Any reset that my brain might have been having to get back to a normal state immediately stopped. And it was only a matter of time until that stopped working, right? And then dark web, opiates, whatever.
Yeah.
And that's what landed me in the homing in.
Okay.
Okay.
So let's go to March 2020. COVID roughly hits around this time.
And my daughter Delilah was born, my 5-year-old. She was born in May 2020. So 2 months before my wife's about to give birth, she catches me taking Kratom. Remember, she's long-term sober. And I go to an IOP program and go back into, 12-step recovery program, get a sponsor, start working some steps. But I South Florida AA is banging, right? It's so fast and furious and it's always going on. There's a ton of people. And like, if you got 9 months down here and you go to one of those meetings in Delray, like there's kids that are going to die if you don't sponsor them tomorrow, right? That's what I remember about it. Orlando is a lot like that, man. It's, you might go to the local clubhouse to an 8 p.m. meeting, which at Oasis should be blowing up. And there's 5 people in there, and it might be 5 people with 30, 40 years sober who are like, man, we're slowing down, people, I just hadn't found the pocket of enthusiasm yet, but to rebuild my fellowship up there was going to be something completely different. And I was going to need that fire underneath me. And so I got sober again in 2020. And a few years earlier, I had gotten into crypto and I had a big crypto win in 2021 during that bull run. And I started working in that industry. But I was just on the outskirts of AA, right? Like I was going to a couple meetings a week, not doing my nightlies, blah, blah, blah. And in 2022, I lost $23 million.
Wait, you lost $23 million in 2022. If you don't mind me asking, if you're allowed to share this, if you're okay with sharing it, in 2021, what was your big win?
So it was a token called Phantom, which is now called Sonic. And I bought it at a third of a penny when nobody knew about them. But it was one of those things where, I've always been kind of a believer in like signs, like things will show up in our experience and we can choose to follow it or not.
Yeah.
This was one of them, and I had just started a company prior. So we had a little bit of money. And I started dumping it into this one at a third of a penny and it ended up going to $3, right? So 1,000x. I didn't take that whole 1,000x. And so when I say I lost 23 million, really what I mean is I failed to take profit on 23 million, right? I had that in my hands and let it go. We did well. I bought a house. Like we did well, right? But then I started getting into the constant chase of, I got to get that back. I got to get it back, right? And
the next Phantom coin.
Yeah. But we had entered a bear market and I didn't have a sponsor that I was willing to be honest with. I didn't have a fellowship around me that I could lean on. I didn't have a home group that knows me, that I can go to and be real intimate with, I just didn't have it. And in 2023, Kratom again. Came right back in. This time it was the extracts. We were going to go a little bit deeper and harder this time. And just so happened I had another baby at that exact same time. So I relapsed so I started a business when Madison was born. I relapsed right after Zachary was born. I relapsed right before Delilah was born. And I relapsed right before Nicholas was born. Or no, right after, excuse me. I kind of picked up, there might be a pattern there. After a little while, because I really resisted more kids. Like when Haley and I got married, I don't know why I had this idea, but like, I thought she just wanted one kid. I had a vasectomy prior to meeting her. I had to have it reversed to have kids, which is good because I had it before Mexico. So don't need that. But so Delilah's born and she's amazing. And Haley's like, I want another kid. And I'm like, I don't want another kid. There's like, I want to go to Europe. I want to do all these things, right? The self-centeredness of it. And then Nicholas is born, who's my little best buddy now, And then I was on an AA retreat, whatever, up in Alabama last year. And I got a call on my birthday, and Haley was freaking out. And I'm like, what is it, babe? And she says, I'm pregnant. And I was in a good place at the time. And I said, I'm really happy for us. And I started going to my home group and sharing. I'm fucking freaked out. Like, I don't know what this is going to look like, how we're going to get through this. 5 kids. Are you kidding me? And something happened, Haley told me a while back, this is interesting. Hey, there's a part in the book that says, to control and enjoy his drinking is the great obsession of every abnormal drinker, right? And my sponsor had said to me, he said, obviously when drinking, if you're controlling it, you're not enjoying it. If you're enjoying it, you're not controlling it.
Mm-hmm.
And he said that really extends over to life though, too. Like if I'm the one that has to be in control of my life, I'm not enjoying it, and vice versa. And Haley, she was the one that knew how to raise kids, and she would discipline, and I would think, man, she's being too hard on these kids. Like, okay, yeah, their room's messy, but like, why do you got to take her phone, or why are we grounded? And I would kind of be like that aloof dad. And she said something to me today, not today, years ago, that hit me between the eyes, and I'll never forget it. And she still to this day doesn't know what she said to me, but she said, listen, for kids to be kids, it's their job to push the boundaries, and it's our job to hold the boundaries. And if we can hold the boundaries, then they will trust that their parents are going to meet their needs. And if they trust that their parents will meet their needs, they're free to be children. And I went, that just summed up the whole program. That if I can trust that my needs are going to be met, that I don't have to be the one to make it all happen, get out of the results business, then I'm free to enjoy my life. And that has been my experience over the last 2 years.
Wow.
And somewhere, somehow, even as far back as Maddie being born, what happened really this last 2 years is I started realizing that the thing that I want more than anything else in this world is I want like deep, meaningful connections with other people. It fires me up more than anything else. And I have a life that is full of that. A life that I pushed up against. I didn't want it, but somewhere I think God knew that this was going to be the one for me. And I got dragged kicking and screaming into it. And today, I want nothing more than to be a good husband and a good dad, and I'm married to a remarkable woman who has she's awesome. The responsibility of my life has seemed to outpace my maturity a lot of the time, right? But she's been real patient with me in learning how to grow into it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So money, seems to be a trigger.
Well, let's talk about that. Because when I came back from Mexico,
please,
I was convinced that the money is what had done it. Like the money made me an asshole, right? And so we were poor for like a couple of years. I was working like easy jobs, sobriety jobs. And one day my wife's like, you got 2 kids. You need to get your head out of your ass and start paying the bills. And boy, did I take that hard. You know what I mean? So I was driving on I-4 back from Tampa one day, and I said, well, what is really preventing me from going and doing the things I know how to do? Like, I know how to do these things. And so I restarted another business in the industry that I had left. And it's still going today, still a part of it. But this most recent time, right, when when I relapsed after Nicholas was born, right, which is, like January to March of 2024, it started with Kratom. It ended with me on the dark web shooting fentanyl in my leg, right, like really bad. And but I didn't lose anything. I didn't lose any money. I didn't lose any relationships. I went to rehab. And this was the first time that I had ever entered into sobriety when what I was afraid of losing was what I already had. And it hit me really hard that I've got everything I could have ever dreamed of. All I have to do is not screw it up. And that was a different experience. That was a completely different experience. And then 7-8 months ago, my daughter Skylar was born. And I got to show up in a way that I'd never shown up before, right? And I get to connect with that little baby in ways that I never could connect with my others,
Mm.
you know? So is money a trigger? No, I'm the trigger. It's me, you know? And due to like my self-centeredness and not wanting to be a father, of course, money gives me opportunities to go into every, type of, hey, I'm going to make myself feel better possible, for sure. Um, but that still falls back on me.
Mm.
It's all me, you know?
It's funny. The constant is your success. You're a successful guy. You're intelligent, and you know how to start a company. You know how to generate revenue,
Yeah.
right? That seems to be the constant theme in your story. The variable is you changed here. You did the inner work this time. So, I mean, it's a number of things: perspective, spirituality, everything that we learn, right?
Yeah.
You've now done the work on yourself. So those constants, when they're showing up again, you had a kid. You seem to have a lot of kids, right?
I have a lot of kids.
That's
Yeah.
a constant.
Yeah.
And this last time, now that you're sober, you had your son,
Daughter. Yep.
You did it successfully.
Yeah.
And by successfully, I say sober.
Yeah.
And showed up and present. You did the inner work. That's the difference. And why don't you talk a little bit about, you talked about Florida, and it's a slower pace of recovery. It's a different vibe. The energy is it's not as alive as it is down here in South Florida. What are you doing today to stay sober on a daily basis?
Yeah. So as long as I had the impression in my head, oh, this is like South Florida, it sucks, blah, blah, right? I was really closing the door to being able to find those pockets of enthusiasm that exist everywhere if you know where to look.
Mm-hmm.
And so my home group is a group called Usual Suspects up in just north of Orlando. And it's 70 men. And it is the most alive meeting, right? And I have a bunch of men that I sponsor. I'm sponsored. I actually talk to the man and tell him truthfully what's going on. But I think the difference is, so I started, see where men of religion are right? That's what the book says. And so I hadn't been to church in 20 years, and I don't go to church now. But I did start doing some exploring, and I read a book called Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis. You ever heard of it?
No.
C.S. Lewis, great writer, but it's an intellectual argument for Christianity. My therapist had recommended it. So I'm like, all right, I'll check it out. I'll stay open-minded. And the very last chapter is about pride. And I always thought I knew what pride meant, right? I didn't know what pride meant. I didn't know that, I shouldn't have to because, or you should do this because, or I'm special because, that these are pride things, right? But the argument that he was making is that when we say playing God here, that's really the pride. The thinking I know how this should look, how this should go. And I had a lot of pride within my own home that was making it difficult, right? Like I would come home, hey, don't bug me for 30 minutes. I've been working all day, or like whatever. Or, you got a girlfriend?
I don't. I'm single.
Okay. Well, you might be able to relate to this. Women cannot fill up their own Stanley cups. It's a physical impossibility, right? If I don't fill up my wife's water bottle, she will turn to dust by the morning. I'm pretty sure of that, right? And so she'd ask me constantly, "Oh, go get me some water," and my pride would come in and go, "You get me water," right? Like, and it would just cause this thing within me and within our relationship. And when I finally learned what it looked like to be a prideful person, and that by me denying that or like not acting out on that, I didn't become the hole in the donut. I actually got better relationships. I actually was okay, that I can be of service in my own home the same way that I'm of service in AA, right? I can put my home life on a service plane, change the game, changed it all. I'm more in love with my wife today than I've ever been. I'm more in love with my kids today and my own life today than I've ever been, And what I do on a daily basis to stay sober, with 5 kids, I get to 3 meetings a week. That's it. I have a detox commitment on Monday because my sponsor said go somewhere every week that you don't want to end up back in. So I go there, and I have my home group on Wednesday. And on Saturdays, if I can get there, I go to a beginners meeting in Maitland, right? And those are my 3. And I sponsor 5 men. I'm very connected. right? When I get to my office in the morning, I got my books waiting there. I do my morning meditation. Every night before bed, I do a nightly inventory and I share it with my sponsor and his sponsees and all of my sponsees. We share it together, right? We remain accountable to one another. And there's still areas that I know I need to grow in, but there are areas that I'm sure I'm blind to at this moment, but they'll show up.
Yeah.
And when they do, like I was doing my detox commitment last night and there was this guy who was saying, yeah, I was doing great in sobriety, but then this happened in my life. And it's like, the program doesn't give us sobriety contingent on our life going well. It gives us the ability to stay sober when our life doesn't go well, or when it does go well, because I've had that happen too, big time.
That was my MO.
Yeah.
When things were great.
Let's go party it out.
I'm going to go get high.
Yeah, exactly.
Uh-huh.
Exactly, dude.
My back's against the wall.
Yeah.
I work a pristine program.
Yeah. Well, it says, we had but two options, right? Bitter end or spiritual help.
Yep.
But with me, when my ass was no longer on fire, when that fear went away, door number 3 always opened up.
Mm-hmm.
Always.
Yeah.
Always, man.
If you had to, you said a lot of great things. If you had to pick one thing that was different this time getting sober versus all the other times you got sober, what was it?
Yeah. If I had to pick one, it would be this: that an alcoholic left untreated is guaranteed to drink. And I have as much power to beat this thing on my own as I have to go out there and lift up a truck. I can't do it. And I don't even need to try. That's the point. It's to do these steps, to get better, but to let something else do the work and to not take credit. I used to sponsor a legion of guys when I was down here, and it was very self-serving in that way. It's easy to become prideful or ego-driven in sobriety. I mean, it's very easy to have it happen. It happened to me. And but just to know that, like, I had one sponsor tell me one time, he says, if you're a real alcoholic, like the book says, pretend you got a bomb strapped to your back with a timer on it. And that timer is guaranteed to go off unless you do some certain simple things every day, and it'll add time to it. But if you ever stop doing these certain simple things, it's going to blow up. And you don't know when and you don't know where, but it will explode. And that made sense. So
really quick before we wrap up, I want to circle back. Where is wife one today?
Yeah, dude, wife one. Oh my God. I have, so she was out in Arizona because she got extradited for punching a cop. And then, when I got custody of my kids back, we tried to, so we essentially moved her to Orlando to be in her kids' life, like be in their life. They need their mother.
Yeah.
And, it just didn't really work out in the way that we had hoped. It did more bad than good for the kids. And most recently she was, arrested for crack possession.
Yeah.
And so we're not in communication whatsoever.
Yeah. Sorry to hear that.
Yeah.
Wife two, how's she doing?
Wife two has died. Yeah.
Wife two died.
Yeah. Yeah. So I hadn't seen her since Mexico. She came back and she, apparently rolled a car in Los Angeles and died.
I know you're remarried and everything, but I'm sorry. That's tough.
It's really tough. It's not necessarily tough on me, like emotionally, but like, I don't want anyone to go through that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, where can people get your book? What's the name of your book? And where's it available?
Here's the book. It's called One Last Hit. It's on Amazon. You can get it everywhere. Barnes and Noble, Walmart. I mean, it's distributed.
That's awesome.
It's out there, man.
You have some story, dude.
Thanks, brother.
You're helping a lot of people by sharing your story. Appreciate the vulnerability. And I appreciate you traveling all the way out here to come on the show.
Yeah. Oh, no. I would do it for a meeting. I'll come chat with you, man. This is great.
Yeah.
I'm glad to be here.
Awesome. Thanks for coming on, dude.
Thanks, Kevin.